Over the course of this series, we've examined numerous major theories surrounding the disappearance and tragic death of Jay Slater. We've heard the official narrative, that Jay died accidentally after falling into a ravine. And we've explored a long list of alternative possibilities, from theft and revenge to deception, drugs, and deliberate abandonment. This final episode isn't about retelling those theories. It's about addressing them. Not through emotion or wild speculation, but by carefully weighing what we know, what we don't, and what stands up when tested against the evidence, testimonies, and timelines we've scrutinized in detail. To do this, we'll use a clear and simple plausibility scale. We'll use highly probable for theories that are strongly supported by evidence, credible testimony, or consistent behavior. A theory that fits the known facts, even without direct proof. We'll use moderately probable for theories that are possible and partially supported, but missing key confirmation or containing unresolved contradictions. We'll use unlikely for theories that sound possible on the surface, but fails to hold up against established facts, timelines, or reliable evidence. And finally, we'll use highly improbable for theories that have no credible foundation, conflicts with known evidence, or leans entirely on speculation and coincidence. We'll apply this scale to each of the major theories explored in this series, not to prove anything beyond doubt, but to offer a reasoned gauge of how each stands up when put under the microscope. And this is about more than opinion. It's about truth. Jay Slater was a young man with his whole life ahead of him. If there's even a chance that what really happened is different to what we've been told, then asking these hard questions is not just fair, it's necessary. So let's go back through each theory, stripping away the noise, the online chatter, and the personal biases, and see where the truth most plausibly lies. We looked at the watch theft theory. This theory surfaced early and has stubbornly clung to the edges of the narrative ever since. The idea that Jay Slater stole, or at least claimed to have stolen, a valuable watch, and that this act might have set off a chain of events leading to his death. Here's what we know for certain. Jay reportedly sent a Snapchat to a friend claiming he had stolen a watch with 2 Somalian kids, and that he'd planned to sell it for £10,000. This message was accompanied by a selfie, although several people, including those who knew Jay well, have pointed out that the person in the image doesn't appear to be Jay. The details are inconsistent. Different accounts describe different watch brands, and there's never been any physical evidence of a stolen watch. When asked about it at the inquest, Ayub Kasim dismissed the story as boosting, just bravado, showing off for effect. The coroner went on so far as to say that the watch was irrelevant to subsequent events. But here's the sticking point. If it was nothing, why was it mentioned multiple times by different people? And why did the story emerge right around the time Jay found himself at a remote Airbnb with 2 older men he barely knew? If Jay had actually taken something expensive from the wrong people, that could have been enough to spark a dangerous reaction, especially in an environment where reputation and retribution carry weight. But if it was just drunken banter that grew legs on social media, then the theory quickly falls apart. And that's the problem here. There's no hard proof, no confirmed theft, no missing item, no one coming forward to say they were robbed. We're left with a claim, a rumour, and a question of intent. Did Jay actually steal a watch, or did he just want people to think he had? On our plausibility scale, we rate this theory as moderately probable. There's enough smoke here to keep this theory in the conversation. The messages, the timing, the whispers that followed him that night. But without a victim, without a watch, and without any evidence tying it to a confrontation, it's just as likely this rumour inflated itself into a supposed motive that never existed at all. We looked at the theory that Jay was lured to his death. From the earliest days of Jay Slater's disappearance, one deeply unsettling possibility has refused to fade. That Jay didn't simply wander off with strangers. He was deliberately lured. Not out of friendliness, not for a harmless after-party, but with intent. And if that's true, the next question is far darker. Lured for what? Here are the key elements that keep this theory alive. Firstly, Jay met up with Ayub Kasim and Stephen Rokas late into the night. Two much older men with criminal ties, including Kasim's history as a convicted drug dealer. Despite friends urging him to come home, Jay went with them to a remote Airbnb buried in the mountains, an area with no phone signal, limited access, and terrain so difficult the coroner later described it as unfrequented by people. Kasim himself told the inquest that Jay just followed them and wasn't directly invited. Even the phrasing feels oddly detached, almost like a disclaimer. Rokas has never given a testimony. He actively avoided police and has refused to speak publicly, despite being one of the last people to see Jay alive. Brandon Hodgson, another key figure, refused to provide in-person testimony. The coroner openly acknowledged his unwillingness to cooperate. This theory hinges on one chilling possibility, that Jay was taken there under false pretenses, whether to be robbed, used for something illegal, or targeted for revenge. Now here's the challenge. There's no physical evidence of coercion, no message proving he was tricked. And officially, Kasim and Rokas have faced no criminal suspicion, no formal accusations. But here's what is undeniable. Almost no one behaves the way these men did if there was nothing to hide. Kasim's testimony was riddled with evasions. Rokas disappeared entirely. Hodgson refused to answer questions. And yet, the coroner found no reason to doubt them. On our plausibility scale, we rate this theory as highly probable. While direct proof is missing, the behavior of almost every person linked to Jay's final movements is suspicious. Too many have avoided scrutiny. Too many details are left unexplained. And the Airbnb's location alone raises red flags. The idea that Jay was deliberately lured, for reasons still unknown, remains one of the strongest possibilities in this case. The next theory we looked at was the drug connection. One of the most persistent and troubling threads in this case is the theory that drugs were not just part of the party scene, but at the very center of whatever happened to Jay Slater. We know from the coroner's findings that drugs were involved. Toxicology confirmed the presence of MDMA, cocaine, alcohol, and ketamine, with both short-term and long-term traces in his system. That's not in dispute. The real question is this: was Jay simply using drugs that night, or did he become entangled in something much deeper, much riskier? Here are the core points keeping this theory alive. Kasim's criminal background. This is not rumour, it is fact. He is a convicted UK drug dealer with a known history. The remote Airbnb, far from Tenerife's nightlife. It's an odd choice for an after-party. It's been speculated that the location could serve as a discreet base for drug-related operations, whether it's storing, selling, or working away from police attention. The timing. Just hours after being kicked out of a nightclub for being too intoxicated to stand, Jay ended up in the mountains with two men much older than him, and one with a serious criminal past. Then there's the missing or consumed package theory. If Jay was used, knowingly or unknowingly, to transport drugs or cash, and it went missing or it was taken, it could have instantly put him in serious danger. Then there's the tone of Jay's calls. In later phone calls, Jay sounded scared, confused, and desperate for water. He told Lucy Law he needed a drink, and that he was scared. Was that fear just about being lost in the mountains, or was it about something that had already gone wrong? Some versions of the theory suggest Jay was used as a mule, willingly or not. Others say he may have taken drugs that were meant for sale. Either could explain a sudden change in atmosphere, a forced departure from the Airbnb, and the panic that seems to colour his final calls. Still, there is no direct proof. The drugs in his system could have been purely recreational. And no one, not even Kasim, has testified that Jay was involved in anything illegal that night. On our plausibility scale, we rate this theory as moderately probable. The heavy drug presence in this circle, the involvement of a convicted dealer, and the unusual location all point towards the possibility of a deeper drug connection. But without a witness or direct evidence tying Jay to trafficking, storage, or theft, the theory remains speculative. It's a door that refuses to close, but one we can't open fully without someone finally talking. Another theory we looked into was the fall that doesn't add up. This chapter isn't just about whether Jay Slater fell. It's about what that fall actually tells us, and what it may have hidden. According to the coroner, Jay died after falling between 20 and 25 meters while attempting to descend the Juan Lopez ravine, a steep, overgrown, and rarely visited stretch of hostile terrain. The impact, we're told, caused catastrophic brain injuries, and death was likely instant. But the real question here is chilling in its simplicity. Did Jay suffer other injuries before that fall? Injuries masked by the fall itself? The post-mortem concluded that Jay suffered a traumatic head injury, consistent with blunt impact. But what's striking is what wasn't found. A fall from height, especially in rough terrain, almost always produces more damage. Fractured limbs, broken ribs, multiple abrasions, torn ligaments. Yet Jay's body, though mummified due to exposure, showed no mention of widespread trauma, no defensive wounds, and no sign he tried to shield himself. That points to two possibilities. The first is that Jay didn't tumble. He dropped clean and fast. Or he was already unconscious or dead before he even hit the rocks. In our earlier discussion, we explored how a fall from height can disguise pre-existing injuries. Severe blunt force trauma to the head could look identical whether caused by a fall or by an assault. And with a mummified body, bruising and soft tissue damage are almost impossible to detect. Could Jay have been attacked, knocked unconscious, or even worse, lifeless before being placed in the ravine? The evidence, or lack thereof, leaves that possibility very much alive. Jay's body was found meters above the dry riverbed. His bag containing his phone and passport was found 20 meters further uphill. If Jay fell naturally while walking, the bag should have fallen with him, or even further downhill. But it didn't. It was uphill. That suggests placement, not an accident. And then there's the ravine itself. The Juan Lopez is not on any route back to civilization. It's not a known walking path, and it has no water source. Locals don't go there. So if Jay was trying to get home, why head down there at all? We also have to consider whether the conclusion of a simple fall might have been a convenient disguise for something darker. Dropping a body from height can destroy forensic evidence, cause injuries that obscure the real cause of death, and leave investigators with little to work with, especially after weeks of exposure in harsh terrain. If someone wanted to conceal the truth about how Jay died, placing him in that ravine would be brutally effective. So on our plausibility scale, we rate this theory as highly probable. The isolated head injury, the position of his bag, the illogical location, and the post-mortem's forensic limitations all point toward the likelihood that Jay suffered an injury before his fall. Whether he was unconscious, attacked, or already dead, the official explanation of a simple slip doesn't account for all the facts. The fall may have happened, but it might have also been the final step in covering up what really occurred. We then looked at the theory of revenge for Tom Hilton, a grudge from the past. This theory doesn't begin in Tenerife. It begins in Lancashire, back in 2021. That year, Tom Hilton, a 17-year-old boy, was the victim of a horrific attack. He was stabbed multiple times by a gang of youths in Rishton, Lancashire, an ambush that shocked the local community and made national headlines. Tom survived, but the brutality of the assault left physical and emotional scars likely to last a lifetime. 8 teenagers were convicted in connection with the attack. One of them was Jay Slater. Jay wasn't charged with stabbing Tom, but he was found guilty of violent disorder for his role in the incident. His sentence? An 18-month community order, 150 hours of unpaid work, and 25 rehabilitation days. He may not have wielded a knife, but locally, his name became permanently tied to the case. What gives this theory its edge is a widely circulated, though unconfirmed, claim that Ayub Kasim, one of the men Jay was last with at the remote Airbnb in Masca, had previously served time in prison with Tom Hilton's father. If true, this changes the dynamic entirely. It would mean Kasim may have known exactly who Jay was, not as a random tourist, but as one of the teenagers convicted in the attack on Tom. That knowledge could transform a chance meeting into a calculated encounter. Was it just coincidence that Jay ended up under Kasim's roof, far from his friends, isolated in the mountains? Or could it have been the perfect setup for a personal score to be settled? The behavior of those linked to Jay's final hours adds weight to this theory. Ayub Kasim refused to appear at the first inquest. Stephen Rockus evaded all efforts to be served. Brandon Hodgson, the friend who reportedly introduced Jay to Kasim and Rockus, refused to give evidence, even when contacted by police. 3 key people who could have clarified the relationship between Jay and the men he was with, and all 3 stayed silent. If this was simply a tragic accident, why would they avoid the chance to set the record straight? There's no confirmed record linking Kasim and Hilton's father in official prison files, not that we found at least, and no documented proof that Jay's death was connected to the Hilton case. But the context does matter. Jay's conviction was public knowledge. The attack on Tom Hilton was no secret. If someone with a grudge knew who Jay was, and had the opportunity to act, the motive is there. And when those same individuals then vanish from view or refuse to answer questions, suspicion naturally grows. So on our plausibility scale, we rate this theory as moderately probable. This theory is built entirely on motive, not on speculation about falls, drugs, or missing time. The motive is strong, the opportunity was there, and the silence of key witnesses only deepens the shadows over Jay's final hours. While no direct evidence links the Hilton case to Tenerife, the possibility of revenge was never fully explored. And in an investigation this complex, that's a gap that matters. We then looked at the phone theory, whether it was dropped, thrown, or planted. Jay Slater's phone, or more precisely, the location of his final ping, has always been one of the most puzzling elements of this case. According to confirmed reports, the phone last pinged in the Parque Rural de Teno, a mountainous and unforgiving region in Tenerife known for its dangerous terrain and patchy mobile coverage. The phone was later recovered in the same area and handed to Lancashire police. The question is, how did it get there? We're told that Jay left the Airbnb sometime early on the morning of the 17th of June. Ayub Kasim claims Jay wanted to catch a bus and refused a lift, choosing instead to walk away calmly. Kasim says Jay took the left-hand road. Now that's significant, because that road leads uphill, away from the coast and deeper into the steep ravines of Masca. Why would anyone in Jay's state, tired, hungover, dehydrated, low on battery, choose to walk uphill into a remote and dangerous area with no water and no real idea where they were going? The terrain isn't just rural, it's treacherous. A former British Army officer who analysed the area described it as somewhere no sensible person would venture alone without proper gear. Yet, this is exactly where Jay's phone was last detected. One theory, suggested and echoed by investigative journalist Nick Pisa, is that Jay's phone may have been thrown into the ravine rather than carried there. If someone wanted to mislead investigators or simulate Jay's route, tossing the phone would make sense. It would explain why the device ended up in such an inaccessible place without any confirmed sightings or footage of him walking there. The ping zone was precise. The climb from the Airbnb is steep and punishing. By all accounts, Jay was trying to get home, not go on an uphill trek. The inquest confirmed that over 73,000 pages of phone and digital data were examined, yet none of it was presented publicly. So we don't know whether Jay's movements matched Kasim's account, or if there was any unusual phone activity before the ping. We don't know whether other devices pinged nearby, or if the metadata supports the walked or thrown theory. Instead, we're left with a final ping, a single data point that says where the phone ended up, but nothing about how it got there. The phone ping is often used to bolster the idea that Jay wandered off and got lost. But if it was deliberately placed, thrown, or moved after the fact, that version of events collapses. It would mean Jay had never walked that route at all, and that raises the possibility of staged evidence, calculated misdirection, or the disposal of a key piece of proof. And on our plausibility scale, we rate this theory as moderately probable. We can't prove the phone was thrown, but the combination of Jay's physical state, the brutal terrain, the absence of corroborating sightings, and the lack of disclosed digital evidence makes the walked there version difficult to accept at face value. If someone did throw that phone, it may have been the final move in erasing the true path of Jay Slater's final hours. We then looked at the GoFundMe theory, community support or concealed motives. In the early hours after Jay Slater's disappearance, public concern exploded. His name trended on social media, news outlets covered the story in real time, and strangers across the UK and beyond wanted to help. It was in this wave of urgency and emotion that a GoFundMe titled Get Jay Home appeared, launched by Lucy Law, Jay's friend who had travelled with him to Tenerife. It took just hours to start raising serious money, but it also raised serious questions. Debbie had no knowledge of the GoFundMe. This isn't speculation. It comes directly from Debbie Duncan herself. In her own words, she told The Sun, "I did not know anything about GoFundMe and did not know what it was. We were only told about it by Lucy when we were at the police station." By the time Debbie found out, the fundraiser was live, donations were flowing in, and public attention was locked on the page. There had been no consultation, no request for permission, and no opportunity for the family to decide if such a campaign should even exist. Yet in the months that followed, Debbie would bear the brunt of online accusations, claims she stole the money, misused it, or profited from the tragedy. These accusations ignore the key fact. Debbie did not create the GoFundMe. Lucy did, and she did so without telling the family until it was already underway. When Debbie landed in Tenerife, she received a Snapchat message that would haunt her. It said, "I'll give you one warning. Your son won't be coming back. He owes us enough effing money. Kiss goodbye to him." This wasn't tabloid gossip. Debbie confirmed it to press herself. The sender remains unknown. No individuals were named, but the threat was clear. Jay allegedly owed money. If true, this could reframe the entire case. And yet, at the inquest, this message was never mentioned. No follow-up questions, no digital trace analysis, nothing. We've already explored the possibility that Jay's disappearance might have had a financial motive, perhaps tied to lost drugs, consumed substances, or an unpaid debt. If that's the case, then the GoFundMe could take on a different context. Not just a public appeal, but potentially a way to quickly raise cash under intense pressure. Was it panic? Was it a response to threats? Or was it something more deliberate? We can't answer those questions with certainty, but they have to be asked. The fundraiser launched just 3 days after Jay vanished, while search efforts were still underway and no one knew if he was alive. The original aim was get Jay home, but there was no budget breakdown, no plan, and no clarity on how the money would be used. After Jay's body was found, the description was updated to say the funds would cover his repatriation and funeral, but no detailed spending record has ever been made public. And GoFundMe confirmed that there is no need to. But once again, the inquest made no mention of the fundraiser at all. This theory, on our plausibility scale, we rate it as highly probable. The sequence of events, the threatening message, the lack of family involvement, and the absence of transparency all point toward the likelihood that the fundraiser was tangled up in deeper, unspoken issues. Whether it was a genuine but poorly managed attempt to help, or part of something more calculated, remains unclear. What is clear is this. Debbie Duncan was blindsided, then left to carry the weight of suspicion, grief, and public hostility. If there is more to the GoFundMe than meets the eye, the truth matters. Not only for public trust, but for clearing the name of a mother who lost everything. And so, we reach the end. Not just the end of an episode, or a series, but the end of what little clarity the official process has provided in the case of Jay Slater. An 18-year-old boy went on holiday and never came home. The world watched, hoped, grieved, and questioned. And after months of searching, theorizing, investigating, and finally, hearing evidence in a courtroom, the mystery somehow only deepened. We've gone through the theories, we've reviewed the evidence, we've listened to what was said at the inquest, and more importantly, what wasn't. And still, a question remains suspended in the air, unanswered. What really happened to Jay Slater? Not the sanitized version, not the convenient one, not the one wrapped in legal boundaries or padded with generalities, but the real story. The version that accounts for the inconsistencies, the disappearances, the silence, the fear, and the moments that still don't sit right. What we've seen throughout this case, and especially in the inquest, is a pattern of avoidance. Testimonies that contradict, evidence that's skimmed over, crucial details like a threatening Snapchat message ignored entirely. Witnesses disappear, friends withhold, questions remain unasked, and conclusions are delivered not with certainty, but with convenience. As we've said from the beginning, this series has not been about speculating wildly or assigning guilt without basis. It's been about shining a light in places where darkness remains, because only by doing that can we hope to reach something close to the truth. Some theories feel unlikely, others feel far too close for comfort. And while we've weighed each one, it's worth acknowledging that in the absence of definitive answers, truth often lives between the lines, in what people won't say, in what evidence isn't presented, and in what official systems don't dare to question. What we've learned is this. Closure doesn't come from a courtroom, not when the truth is still hiding, not when people with answers have disappeared, not when the system seems more interested in ending a process than uncovering what really happened. And finally, to Debbie Duncan, Warren Slater, Jay's family, and all of Jay's loved ones. We see you. We see the pain, the confusion, the strength, and the dignity it takes to fight through the noise, the trolls, the accusations, and the silence. We can't bring Jay back, but we can refuse to forget him. We can refuse to let this story fade into the background of unsolved mysteries. We can demand that the unanswered questions stay unanswered only until they are answered properly. Jay Slater wasn't just a headline. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and a young man with his whole life ahead of him. This series was created in his name, to ask the questions others would not, to keep the light shining, to make sure that if there's more to this story, it's not buried. Because at the very least, Jay deserves that. And so do the people who loved him. Thank you for joining us in this journey. If you found value in this series, if you believe the truth still matters, please like, comment, and subscribe to the Silent Casebook. Your voice helps amplify this one. We'll be back with new stories, new investigations, and the same commitment to truth, clarity, and compassion. But for now, we sign off. Rest in peace, Jay.